for coming. Much appreciated. I know some of you know Titan gear through and through, other people not necessarily. Um, it's a complicated system that they're actually going to be changing. I do have a couple of different things that I want to touch on. There's quite a bit that we need to go over. Since this is being recorded, I'm guessing some people will just look back on that. So where I kind of wanted to start was just a broad overview of what the system is. Intercede with any questions you guys have at any point. Feel free. Basic system here is the gear that you have available to craft. These slots are the ones that you're going to be inputting into your individual heroes. Pretty straightforward there, nothing's fancy. And then you got your list of everything that you craft, and then you insert it in, one and done. That part is kind of where the simplicity ends, because then they ended up with these different crafting options and combinations for each of the pieces of gear. Now, the two that they decided are the most valuable are the ones that have the blue material requirement. It's this little debatable between these two, these first two, the assault pistol and your tactical armor, or the gloves, your portable GPS as they call it here. But the gloves provide a big bonus on their special effect that we're going to talk about when we get to that point. The part that you can kind of glaze over on a lot of these is your random attributes that get applied and your base attributes. Those are valuable, but only really to a point. The main focus of Titan gear at the beginning and the end of the day. Thank you, Haley. Kiddo decided to pop in here. Okay, so sorry. Hold on 1 second, guys. Sorry about that. She was bringing down my dinner for me. Where was I? Oh, so the big focus of Titan gear is the special effects. Anybody that thinks otherwise, you're fooling yourself. The entire, like, they gave you a 0.5% chance to get a legendary item to begin with, and then it's even more difficult to get a special effect, which is why they're actually overhauling this part of the system. But we'll get to that a little bit later on. This special effect is the most important part of Titan gear. It doesn't really matter what else you guys do with your Titan gear. I mean, if you just want to go through and you slap on like whatever basic stuff on here, I mean, if you had all purples that are really good purples, that's fine right now. I would not worry about that. You do not need legendaries in every slot. You're going to get a benefit there. You're definitely getting some stats, especially if you go ahead and boost them. You're going to get, you know, some decent attack, maybe some HP, but that's nothing in comparison to what the special effects can do for each one of these. Right now, this is your assault pistol. You have a chance of a 0.5% chance with no catalyst of rolling a legendary item. And then there's a hidden percent chance that that legendary item rolls with any one of these special effects. You have no control over which special effect it is, and it is totally random. Again, with hidden percent chances that we don't know. These are really good, and these are what you should be looking for. The rest does not really matter. These effects are bar none what you want to be doing for two reasons. One, they are really good, as in what you're getting out of them is really good. The first one here, which this is really good, but it's not necessarily as good depending on the hero as, say, your all-out surge. But Artillery Storm, it basically buffs your attack enhancement. So if you looked at like Gypsy that has, I think it's like 60% attack increase, this will boost that by another 30%. Pretty flat, pretty straightforward. That's nice, but All Out Surge, for example, is essentially a second trigger of Gypsy's attack. So he will have a chance to trigger his ability again for 50% of the damage that it was originally cast at. This can become a lot of damage with heroes triggering a lot or have a high trigger or trigger with a lot of damage. That's a big deal. And then obviously the one that a lot of people are looking at, for example, here is tactical awareness. This is a straight 20% damage increase to that hero. And then you can stack this with additional gear that has that attribute on, or sorry, that special effect on it. So like if you got one of these that has that, now this is another 20%. And this one, I believe, actually also has the better option. So if you get the legendary version of it, that's a 40% increase. And that's why a lot of people are looking at the gloves, because this one has that chance of rolling a 40% damage increase. And then these other special effects layer into that. Now, that's the easy part. Where Top War is making things complicated and interesting is how these things layer. These things are going to layer from here on. They've been saying it now for a while. It's on the Top War Discord. Quite a bit of what their new direction that they're pushing for now, if you follow any of the streamers, is that they're pushing more towards synergies with heroes. So what they want, and I'm gonna back out here for a moment. What they're looking at is sort of redoing the way that they look at the way that they set up heroes. And I really like Air Force right now. It's a good way of breaking it out. They kind of broke it out into two different categories. So basically, all of your heroes that you're going to be getting for Air Force from here on are going to fall into, for the most part, these two categories of development methodology. So this top one here is improving your regular attacks. That's all this is geared towards. Duke does have a slight minor increase on his, I believe it's his level 5 exclusive skill that helps this, which is why this is being suggested, and if you were going to go that route, why you would go that route. But essentially, you're just boosting your regular attacks. Now, where synergies are going to come in is anything that you can do to improve that. But this is as straight and as easy as it gets. Where it'll now get complicated is in heroes like Asuka, or in army heroes like Bryn here. Brynhild makes things a little bit more interesting, and Navy has some very interesting ones that get complicated. But I'm going to focus on Asuka here for now. Asuka is super interesting because you can scale. So what they're doing now is you can take this hero, like right now, what you get with Max, this is what you get. Right here, this skill, this is all you get. Maximo is a really old hero. What you read here is the damage you're going to get. This is all straightforward, and then they threw on an ignition on top of it later on in the skill here, and bam, this is all you get, right? The exclusive doesn't really do anything other than if you got a level 7, and there is just amping your damage and your ignition. Super straightforward. Nothing too crazy. Asuka is where they're going to start looking at synergies, and then Titan gear rolls into that, and it gets complicated. So, typical thing, you have a proc chance. You have a chance to trigger. We're going to ignore the prep. That's all standard boiler plate type stuff. This is where you have a chance to trigger her skill. Same thing, just like if you had Gypsy or Crimson or anything, right? They have a basic attack that's trigger based, and you have a chance to proc that whenever a regular attack happens from one of your troops. That at max level doesn't change. So this is an event hero. Event heroes are really good, kind of for this reason. There isn't much variation between their level 5 and their lower ones, so it's very consistent, and usually is pretty high base, and you don't have to do much there. This is where it gets interesting though. So if that triggered attack hits an enemy target that has a status damage on it, what they're referring to here is either ignition or magnetic pulse. It does not matter what the source is of either one of those status dots. If that target has one or more of these, because they stack, by the way, if it has one of those or more on them, then what her triggered ability does is it goes and takes that status damage and detonates it for that entire damage right then and there when she hits that target. So instead of waiting until that target's turn for that damage to trigger on the ignite or the magnetic, it will be immediately detonate it, it'll resolve it and consume all of that status damage. It will do that for every single one. So let's say you had stacked 3 ignitions and a magnetic pulse on that unit, and her attack triggers and hits that target, it will resolve all of those dots on them. Dots, by the way, damage over time, if anybody was wondering. They call it damage over time because it doesn't affect that target immediately. It's only when they actually get to their turn in the rotation of who's going on what. This you can stack. So since you can stack these, that means then going back to Titan gear, you can go into Titan gear and you're going to want to look for things that give you some kind of benefit to ignition or magnetic. So either one of these is a great thing for Asuka because now you can start scaling. There's 2 different flavors for all of these. So ignition, vulnerable, debilitation, magnetic, vulnerable, debilitation, magnetic. You can see it just keeps repeating through. And it gives you 2 different flavors. So in this gear, it's increasing the effect of that ignition or magnetic when it is applied to the enemy unit. So when we looked at Maximo, of course the skill's not here, that skill was applying a 90% ignite. So instead of a 90% ignite, now you're looking at that ignite being 30% more on top of that. So now you're looking at 120% ignite that gets applied when Maximo is attacking and applies ignite. That works because that hero is applying the ignite. That will not work if you try to apply this to a hero that does not have any one of these. So Gypsy, if you have level 5, applies a vulnerable at the beginning, but only the level 7 will do it from there on. So at the beginning, that vulnerable effect will be increased by an additional 30%. But what you can do is look at some of these other ones. I think I grabbed the wrong one. So the ones that are more like defensive oriented, the HP ones, they increase. The gloves, for example, is searing. So now, if you have this, you get a legendary item with this effect. It will add 1 stack of 30% ignite on 2 random targets when, let's go back to Asuka, she attacks. So when her triggered attack hits another target, it will automatically apply a stack to 2 targets of 30% ignition. Now she applies that, right? The only part of that I don't know is if it's immediately resolved or if it applies and then it would be resolved on her next attack. I don't have her and I don't have this specifically on Titan gear, and I haven't read or seen if like what the order of operation is there for that, but regardless, you're still stacking this. The more opportunities that you have to stack the ignition, the more damage Asuka is going to do. Same thing for Bryn. She's looking for magnetic to do her damage, so the more stacks of magnetic pulse that you have, the more damage that's going to do when they get blown up, when they're triggered. I'm going to pause there. Questions? Nobody? Okay, so this is where you get into scaling. You haven't really had scaling up to this point unless you were just scaling your typical damage things, right? So you're adding on damage increase or attack is pretty much where you're getting most of your damage from. And then it's being amplified by whatever hero's ability is. So when you're looking at these, this is what you get. You don't really have any way of increasing their attack damage outside of these numbers. And that's kind of why TW had to make some of these like really big numbers depending on how they were functioning, because you don't really have much for a way of modifying and customizing what your heroes are going to be doing and how they can kind of scale. And scaling is really important in gaming in general, not just here, but pretty much any game that you play. And then the way that those things are scaled is what's important. And they're using percent math here. And the percent math is important because that's the way that you're going to be scaling off of those things. And Gypsy is a phenomenal one to try to scale things off of because of how high these numbers are by default. So that's why Gypsy like does so much and why they made the level 7 like crazy, because now at level 7 he's applying a stack of vulnerable. Now you can kind of get away from this though using Titan gear. You don't need this level 7 exclusive. With Titan gear, you can come in here and look for a piece of Titan gear that has vulnerable stacks that are being added. So now when Gypsy goes and hits a target that had this applied to it, he's going to get that vulnerable bonus on his skill damage. That's pretty awesome because now you don't have to worry about his level 7 as much. Obviously, most of us won't. We're not whales. We're not spending that kind of money to go do a level 7. So this is really helpful for us. Downside is getting these special effects is very difficult. It's not easy right now, and a lot of people have been complaining. Really, the best way to do it is Catalyst. So Catalyst, I would really only recommend using any of this research here to research the Titan gear is if you have a Catalyst. If you don't have a Catalyst, then there isn't much point in trying to get a Titan gear. The percentages are too low. They're really not good. It's a really bad math. TW knows this. That's why in the early days they kind of did it intentionally, to get people to spend. You're going to spend a lot of money to try to get legendaries this way. It's just not efficient. It's not a great way to go. Obviously the best way would have your top tier catalyst, the orange one here, but those are difficult to get, and they kind of put those behind a lot of pay to win, pay barriers to get those. They're changing that. So they're changing a couple of things soon. The last I saw, I think it was just yesterday or this morning. It might have been this morning actually. They just put up some new updates in the spoilers that say that they're going to be overhauling this part of it, the legendary effects. So it sounds like it's going to be a little bit easier for us to get special effects, but not just that, they're also going to make this a tiered system. So you kind of see here how some of these are tiered where, actually this might be the better one. So this is a good way of looking at it. So right now there are blue, purple, and orange options here, and it's a higher percentage for each one. So they're going to break that apart even more and allow your Titan gear with special effects to be upgradable. So these effects are, I believe the last I saw, going to have 5 different levels, and they're breaking this apart. So instead of like 40%, I think it's still the highest is 40%, but you're going to end up with like 5 different levels in here that you can upgrade it through. And these percents are going to shift a little bit. So like this ends up being a lower percent on the bottom end. I think it was like maybe 5 or 10%. And then it like increases up from there until you reach your 40% maximum. That's kind of good if you're getting the legendary special effects, but if you're not, it really, really still doesn't help a lot in that area. But it sounds like they're getting a lot of complaints that these aren't available. They haven't really elaborated too much on making that a more available. What they did, though, elaborate on is anybody that's been spending all their catalysts and investing in trying to get these legendaries is that if you've taken your legendaries, and we're going to now get into the next part here. On the operator table that you'll see right here in the bottom left is they've got Titan Inheritance, Titan Recycling, and Titan Reforge. So Titan Recycling is the one that's getting changed. Sorry, kiddo interrupted again. So Titan recycling is what's getting changed, for the most part. I think you're still going to see a little bit change with Titan inheritance, and I think you might see some changes in the future too to Titan reforge. But the big one that's probably going to get changed here is Titan recycling, because a lot of people, what they've been doing is this, where you go through your legendaries, anything, and this is kind of what I don't want to remove that. I'm gonna come over here and just look at this one. So this is what Mocking was talking about. If any of you were looking at Discord and wondering, well, what the hell is Mocking talking about? How am I supposed to do that or know what's going on? Well, this is how. Uh, he's saying if you don't have a, do I even have one? So here, he's saying if you don't have a random attribute of something that's a legendary stat one here, a random attribute like this 15% HP, if you don't have that on a legendary piece of gear, and or it doesn't have a special effect, with obviously the primary thing being one of those special effects, then that legendary gear, for all intents and purposes, realistically for pretty much all of us, is trash. This isn't very useful to me. This isn't very useful to me, and this isn't very useful to me. You could make a slight argument that when you start getting into like maybe damage increase, it's a little bit more useful. I mean, obviously you're going to see some improvements in some of your damage on like World Boss. You'll see the numbers primarily there. You can kind of see your increments change here and there with some of this stuff, but you're not going to see massive changes. So the idea is currently that you would take most of this legendary gear, replace it with a really good purple because it's essentially the same, and I've done that with some of mine. You can see, so like that one, I just left it with a 9% army attack. That's actually pretty good. I think I have a couple of other. Sometimes the purple rolls really, really well with some of these high-end purple stats. Like that's comparable, right? I know it didn't roll with the Air Force attack on it, but 1.94% Air Force damage increase. That's solid. All right, I have that. I don't need the legendary anymore. You take the legendary off, and then you come over here to your operating table. You go into Titan Recycling, and in Titan Recycling, what you'd want to do here is take that gear, that legendary, and you're going to roll for a chance for that to give you a top tier catalyst that you can then re-roll into a chance for a legendary effect, which is what we're really trying for here. That's your end game. Now, the downside, and what makes this suck, is thanks TW, you have to take 3 pieces of legendary gear to get potentially 1. I think somewhere in here it said you might get more. I've seen this drop 2. I think you have the potential to get up to 3, but I've really only ever seen this drop 2 top tier catalysts for me. I have gotten a stabilizer. We'll get to that in a little bit here. But you're mainly looking for getting top tier catalysts out of here. They're revamping this. This is going to get changed because what they're going to do is anybody that's done this and used up a bunch of their legendaries and you haven't gotten jack squat out of it, like you were looking for legendary effects, you didn't get any. That sucks. Why did I do this? You feel like it's a complete waste. Well, TW finally sees the light and they agree. So what they're going to do is change that and also reimburse. I'm a little shaky on the math, but they're going to reimburse us for anybody that's done that and you've used up legendaries in that manner, and you're going to get I believe tokens back, some token they're going to add in for that and try and compensate players and say, look, you get this, and then you're going to be able to go into one of these systems in here and be able to try to roll that into a special effect legendary that if I'm reading and understanding correctly, will have a higher chance of giving a special effect. Last I saw is they were looking at the end of February, so odds are they're probably waiting for this EL to get done with. So once Eternal Lands is over, that sounds like when they're going to implement their first iteration. And then they're talking about at least 2 more iterations after that to Titan Gear. So this is going to get revamped a lot over the next couple of months. I would definitely pay attention to what's going on with those changes. If you're not sure, feel free to ask. I try to stay up to date on the discords, the top war discords. And I've got a lot of those saved, and I try to look through the forums as much as I can in the posts to know what's going on. I do not consider myself an expert on the nickel and diming of all the specifics in here. If you also want to look, Mocking did put up some really good information about this. What the conventional wisdom is being stated right now is that you should use your catalysts and try to get as many legendaries as you can and recycle and roll them out before they do that update at the end of February. I'm kind of in that group right now. At first, I wasn't. I was thinking we should hold these and wait until they make their changes, but with them reimbursing us, and it sounds like those items might actually have a higher chance at giving us the special effects, which is what we're here for. I would strongly suggest continuing to use your catalyst to see if you can get any kind of special effect legendary. That's hands down your best way to go. And then if you do, that gets us into some of these other things. So what you can do with Titan Reforge is you can try to get the legendary special effect that you're looking for. As you can see, I have none that have a special effect. So, that's fun. So their idea here is what you can do is take something that has a legendary special effect and you're supposedly getting a higher chance of getting a special effect, and it's increasing the more times you do this. Their idea of what would be considered in gaming terms bad luck protection is kind of a joke in my opinion. I don't think that it's very good. Some of these would be a really good way to go, but you have to put in quite a bit in here before the bad luck protection really kicks in enough to be effective, in my opinion. This feels like it was kind of built for whales that were mad that they weren't getting the special effects that they were looking for, and you're going to be plugging in quite a bit. Where this will probably come in handy for the bulk of us is later on down the road when they continue to make more adjustments. They're seeing that they're not really getting as much bang for their buck out of the system, and more of us are getting special effects. Once you start building up a lot of those, then you can kind of look at this and try to narrow down what it is that you're looking for. This is probably months down the road before most people are going to care about it. Questions on this? Are all of you not talking just because I'm streaming now? That's what it is, isn't it? Titan Inheritance. This is if you want it to move a special effect. So if you got a special effect, but you got a better piece of a legendary gear and you'd rather have that special effect on a different piece of gear, then you can bring that special effect over to it. It will destroy the gear that you're taking it from, as is pretty much everything here. So be careful with Inheritance. This one is primarily for the special effects. You do have the option to inherit other attributes. So like if you really wanted to try to nickel and dime this, what you could do is, this is what I was looking for, refining. So you could roll, so in the refinement, this is where you can try to narrow down stats that you're looking for. This is weird. It operates a little funky. I don't really like it because you're kind of rolling the dice on a stat that you really like for a stat that maybe you don't. I don't have an extra piece of Titan gear that's not equipped right now. But basically what it is you're saying that I want to take a stat from this piece of legendary gear and I want to put it on this other piece of legendary gear. Problem is the entire process is random on both ends. So it's randomly taking an attribute from the gear that you want to take it from. So if you have multiple attributes, it's random. And the gear that you're putting it on, it's also randomized. So what that means is if I have, say, it goes and says, well, you're going to get army attack. Well, that sucks. I didn't want that. That's not what I was looking for. And it goes to put it on the other piece of legendary gear. Well, then it says on that one, you have 3 stats over there as well. What do you want to do? It'll then randomly pick one of those stats to either increase an existing army attack or replace one of the stats randomly. The whole thing, you're rolling the dice. So that's why people got mad and they added in this stabilizer. So the stabilizer allows you to lock one random attribute in the refinement process. So you know that you're definitely going to get that stat when you're bringing it over. The best option you really have, though, is some of these roll with only 2 or 1 attribute. So the fewer the attributes you're working with, the odds are you're going to be able to get what you're looking for. So this is fantastic for me. I've got Air Force attack on both of these. This is great. So I'm looking for, in this scenario, if I wanted to add something to there, I'm looking for Air Force damage, or I'm looking for more Air Force attack on another legendary. And ideally, I would want a legendary that, of course, I don't have any legend more there. I really pared this down recently. So like here, if I was just, you have to match these, by the way. So I can't take a legendary from a different source here, from a different slot, and use it to refine a different one. It has to be from the same. So if you're working on the assault pistol, well, then it has to be from the assault pistols. You can't mix and match from different slots. But like this situation was the way that I want it. Like this one is great because now I have a chance of, only 2 chances, and I'm trying to get this Air Force damage increase over to, say, here, because I want the 3rd stat to be that, or for one of these to be re-rolled. If it's the same stat, it will look at it, and so if it was attack coming over, then it's going to look at one of these and it's going to increase the attack. It essentially stacks it. I believe it's additive and not multiplicative. Okay, so I think that covers the major parts of this. And then Tex also wanted me to touch on, one second here, which ones are best, like ideal situations. So you guys know already we're paying attention to, I was talking to Asuka, talking about Asuka quite a bit. So Asuka, if you can do anything for Ignite, so you want Ignite, Magnetic Pulse, those are great. That's awesome. Which also will bleed back into a good example is if you look closely at your HTs. So if you look at the Heavy Trooper skill on this HT, the Doom Saw Blade, so on this, the last one is an EMP blast. So when you get this one on it, this is saying that its parallel slash will attack 1 additional unit. So now that's 2 targets. That's going to get parallel slash. And both targets will get 1 stack of 15% magnetic pulse. That's great. That's awesome. So I don't care about the defensive stuff. That doesn't matter. The whole point here is that you're adding more stacks of magnetic pulse or ignite. So this heavy trooper is fantastic to pair with Asuka if you're trying to get more stacks of something. This one also works with Bryn. For army. So when you're looking at Bryn is doing damage based off of magnetic, I believe. I could have swore she was doing damage off of it. I guess not. I could have swore that her ability was also doing damage off of it like Asuka's, but it's not. She's just applying lots of magnetics, which is still a good thing. It's not a bad thing. She's just not going to scale off of it. And then the other cool part about Asuka is, if you'll notice in here, this hero's skill will prioritize enemy units that have those dots. So that means she's going to attack the targets that have either magnetic or ignite on them. This is the way more and more heroes are probably going to be built in some way, shape, or form. You're kind of seeing some of that already with Navy. Navy, they're working towards synergies. Crimson works off of abnormal status, so that's any status effect. You name it, whatever. He's getting a damage boost if you have any one of these on an enemy target. And then that's where the Titan gear comes in again. So Titan gear, really beneficial to Crimson. So that's kind of the whole idea, is for as many opportunities to stack these things as possible. And then the other one for what's going to be very useful is when you start looking at the way that they're going to be doing Indestructible and the way that they're going to be doing some of the other. So Navy is real big on this. I think it's Stormoy. Where's her silence? What's the one that adds the light armor? So he adds heavy armor. So Crimson's adding heavy armor, and then there's another Navy hero that adds light armor. So they're offering synergies for the heroes to do more damage based on what they have. So when you're looking at some of these, start looking for that. Start looking for how do these heroes work off of these abilities here. So she's adding light armor here, and there's this one's not doing it. Was it Layla? If anybody knows, feel free to pipe up. I know there was a Navy hero just recently that was doing more damage depending on, or it was increasing stacks based off of light armor and heavy armor. So we're going to start looking for synergies like that. So it's not just reading a hero's ability and being like, oh, well, it does this much damage and it has a chance to deal a crit or some extra damage, and you're done reading. They're not going to be straightforward like that anymore. It's going to be all types of synergies across all three heroes, and you're going to want to make sure they're synergizing, which is also part of the reason why like an indestructible hero needs to be in each one of your marches. So Army, Navy, Air Force, each one has to have an indestructible. So it doesn't really matter right now which one you're using, but you have to have an indestructible hero. From there, your other two heroes should have some kind of synergies. The indestructible heroes don't really have synergies right now that you have to worry about and think about how do they fit in each march, but the other two heroes are going to start to have more and more synergies that you're going to want to think about, and you're going to see more and more of that. So the reason Air Force, point in case, is using Brady is because we're getting more ignite stacks. So here on his level 5, his decoys, when they are consumed, there's a chance to randomly apply a 50% ignite to 3 enemy units. That's a 50% ignite damage that we're adding now to more targets. 3 enemy targets. And then when you look at Asuka's ability on her level 5, she also, at the start of each round, is adding a 50% ignite on 2 enemy units. So now you've got 2 different sources of 50% ignite on multiple units that her ability is going to be blowing up. And then you stack that with synergies that you're going to be getting soon from the special effects in the Titan gear. Because then you're now getting more sources of ignites, in this case, or magnetic pulses, and those are going to stack on enemy units. And then once those are stacked, then you can also get more synergies with your other Titan gear special effects, increasing those effects. So then her dot, Asuka's, is not only taking that and blowing them up, but you're also going to see that hers is amplifying what that dot is. So is it here or here? It's here. So here in her level 5 and her level 7, it's increasing the damage of those dots. So then that's the equivalent of the increase that you get from the Titan gear. So this Titan gear special effect is saying that it increases the effect of ignition. So then what you want is that on a hero that has ignition, that is going to be applying the ignition, because now it's going to increase what that amount is. So now she's increasing it with her special ability, Titan gear is increasing it, and all of this starts scaling together. So when you're looking at Titan gear, when you're thinking about Titan gear, look at special effects. That's where all of it's going to be going forward. That's the whole point of this, is special effects, how it synergizes with hero abilities and how it synergizes with their exclusive skills. And then I'm sure they're going to add another system on top of this at some point that's going to further scale off of this. That's just where they're going in their development process. That's what they've stated. So just keep trying to change your mindset on how does this synergize with all the other things I have going on, including your HTs. I expect that from here on, you're going to see more and more of examples like this. If you guys didn't notice, on the Blazing Gale, the red HT, this actually has also adds a chance to add a vulnerable here. 80% chance to give the target a 15% vulnerable effect. So if you wanted to, this is a good synergy with Gypsy. Gypsy inherently isn't really adding vulnerable unless you have the level 7 exclusive or if you have Titan gear. But then if you start using this with Gypsy and you're trying to really amplify Gypsy's damage up and add these, or Crimson, now you're getting more abnormal status here. So that vulnerable then increases their damage. So start looking for things like that, and don't be as concerned about flat damage things that you're seeing. So always have your mind on how does this work with these status effects that they're doing. Other heroes that you're probably going to be able to do this with in the future. There are heroes that add Ignite. Saker adds Ignite off the level 5 exclusive. I'm actually been fiddling around quite a bit with Serval because I happen to have Serval. Serval's level 5 adds Ignite. So like some of these heroes, if you have them available as like a backup or a secondary or something, maybe look at those as well for your PvE stuff, for like World Boss or other scenarios. You might be able to toss in these heroes and do more damage. And then I think Army is the other one that is primarily kind of going in that direction. You're going to see another example of this with Snake Eyes and with Pollock. So here it's called Hostile or Resistance. And those two effects, they're also then looking at in Titan gear and with your HTs. So like here with the new HT, you have a chance to this one is adding heavy armor to itself, and I'm pretty sure this one was adding no. It's with this here. So with the chipset that came out with the Doom Saw Blade. Okay, sorry, kiddo muted me. Resistance, heavy armor, light armor. So this is going to give extra stacks of that. So these are the things that you want to start looking for when you're looking at all these. And then the other one with Titan gear, this is probably going to be super duper powerful at some point here. If you look at this, the tactical chest armor, if you get unbreakable, this is adding an additional round of indestructible. Right now you're looking at 2 rounds for the level 5 exclusives on the indestructible heroes. This will make it 3 rounds. It is only 50% of the original indestructible, but bottom line, what it essentially is going to do is take most fights that are probably 2 rounds, and then on the 3rd and 4th round, that's when the two sides are going to obliterate each other, because most of the damage is going to happen then after the indestructible falls off. Now that pushes it out another round, so you're looking at fights lasting a little bit longer. And then you can start looking at chipsets on your HT like Shamshir, because now the fight is taking longer. Your HT does more damage, and again, they're going to be looking at ways that the scales and the fights go longer. I think that they're wanting to push the fights to go longer, so they're not just like a couple of rounds and done. So like these like unique things, kind of keep an eye out for things like that. Otherwise, most of this is actually pretty bland when you actually look at this. It's really just how do you stack it? How do you want to stack your Titan gear? How do you want to do this with heroes that are coming out? I think the heroes that come out within the next year here are all going to be like this. They're all going to synergize with essentially Titan gear. Look at this on how they're going to develop heroes. What are we? We're been at this for a while. Questions? Well, if nobody has questions, Kiddo is definitely trying to get my attention, so I'm going to cut this here and